They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They didn't even try to hide it very well. They just cut straight through my fence and started taking my water like it had always belonged to them. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think much of it at first because out here, things break, fences get damaged, lines get crossed. But what they didn't realize is that where I live, water isn't just another resource. It's leverage, it's history, it's survival. And if you mess with it, you're not just picking a fight. You're stepping into something a whole lot bigger than you think. My place sits at the very end of a gravel road that most GPS systems don't even bother finishing. The kind of road where pavement just gives up halfway through and says, "You're on your own now." 8 acres of uneven ground, scattered cedar and scrub oak, rocks that seem to grow back no matter how many you move. And right in the middle of it all, there's a spring-fed pond that's been there longer than anyone around here can remember. I didn't buy this land because it was pretty, though it has its moments, especially early morning when the fog sits low over the water. I bought it because of that pond. Out here, that's everything. Summers get dry in a way that makes you rethink every drop you use. And while other folks haul water in tanks or pray for rain that doesn't come, I've got a gravity line I set up myself that runs from the pond down to my garden and the small orchard I've been slowly building over the years. It's not fancy, but it works. And most years, it's the difference between getting by and losing everything I've put into this place. For the first few years, it was quiet. Just me, the land, and the occasional neighbor driving by slow enough to wave. Then about a year ago, things started changing. Survey flags showed up along the ridge on the far side of my property, bright orange and impossible to ignore. Then came the trucks, the clearing crews, the sound of machinery tearing into land that had been left alone for decades. That's when I first heard the name Silver Creek Ridge, some kind of upscale development, or at least that's what the signs said. Private mountain homes, exclusive living, modern comfort meets nature. All those phrases that sound nice until you realize they usually mean your quiet just got priced out of existence. I met their project manager a few days after the clearing started. His name was Travis Cole, mid-40s maybe, clean boots that had never seen real mud, hard hat sitting just a little too perfectly on his head like it was part of a uniform instead of something he actually needed. He drove up in a white truck that looked like it had been washed that morning, stepped out, gave me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and said, "Hey there, just wanted to introduce myself. Make sure we're all good neighbors here." I remember wiping my hands on my jeans, walking up to the fence line, and saying, "Neighbors usually don't start by knocking down trees." He chuckled at that, like I'd told a decent joke, and said, "Progress, right?" We talked for a bit, property lines, access roads, the usual, and then he asked about water. Just slipped it into the conversation like it wasn't the only thing that really mattered. "You running well water out here?" he asked. I shook my head. "Spring-fed pond." He looked past me toward the trees, like he was trying to spot it from where he stood, and nodded slowly. "That's so reliable." "More than anything else around here," I said. He smiled again, that same careful smile. "Good to know." At the time, it didn't feel like much, just a question. But thinking back, that was the moment everything started tilting in a direction I didn't see yet. Construction picked up fast after that. They cut roads into the hillside, poured gravel, brought in equipment that ran from sunup to well past dark. I kept to my routine, checking my lines, tending the garden, fixing what needed fixing, trying to ignore the noise creeping closer every day. Then, about 3 months in, I noticed something off. It wasn't dramatic at first, just the kind of thing you feel more than see. The pond looked a little lower than usual for that time of year. Not alarming, just different. I told myself it was the heat, or maybe I'd been pulling more water than I thought. But over the next couple weeks, it dropped faster than it should have. 6 inches, then more. Enough that the shoreline started showing dry patches that hadn't been exposed in years. That's when I started paying attention. I walked the perimeter one morning, slow, checking for leaks, cracks, anything that might explain it, but the pond itself was fine. No visible drainage, no signs of seepage beyond what was normal. Still, something wasn't right. I remember standing there, hands on my hips, looking out over the water, and feeling this quiet kind of irritation building. Not panic, not yet, just that sense that something was being taken from me and I hadn't figured out how. So I started tracing the land uphill, following the natural flow of where the spring fed into the pond. It's not obvious unless you know what you're looking for, just subtle changes in soil, patches of greener grass, a slight dip in the terrain. About halfway to the property line, I saw it. At first, it just looked like disturbed dirt, a line cutting through the brush where nothing should have been disturbed. Then I got closer, and my stomach dropped a little. Someone had dug a trench. Fresh, straight, deliberate, running right up to my fence line. And the fence, the barbed wire I'd strung up myself years ago, it had been cut clean. Not torn, not damaged by weather, cut. I crouched down, brushed some dirt aside, and there it was, a black poly pipe, about 1.5 inches thick, running underground from my side, straight through the fence, and disappearing into their property. I just sat there for a second, staring at it, trying to make it make sense, because the only explanation that fit was the one I didn't want to believe. They hadn't just crossed the line, they'd tapped into the source. And that's when I realized this wasn't an accident, and it sure as hell wasn't temporary. I remember just kneeling there for a while, dirt under my fingernails, staring at that pipe like if I looked at it long enough it might explain itself. But it didn't. It just sat there, quiet, buried halfway in my land like it had every right to be there. And that's when something shifted in me. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold. I pulled my phone out, didn't say a word, just hit record. There's something about documenting a moment like that. It changes how you feel it. You stop reacting and start observing. I followed the pipe along the trench, stepping over brush, pushing through branches, the camera catching everything, the cut wire, the depth of the trench, the direction it was heading. I didn't rush. I wanted it clear, undeniable. By the time I crossed onto their side of the fence, I already knew what I was going to find. I just didn't know how bad it would be. It was worse. They had a full setup running. A large vertical storage tank, easily a few thousand gallons, sitting beside a portable concrete mixing station. The pipe from my land fed directly into it. No attempt to hide it now that I could see the whole system, valves, connectors, even a secondary line branching off toward where they were laying foundations. I zoomed in on the connection point, then panned out slowly, letting the whole scene speak for itself. They didn't just take water. I muttered under my breath, more to myself than the camera. They built their operation around it. I ended the recording, stood there a second longer, then turned and walked back the way I came, step by step, my mind already moving ahead. By the time I got back to the house, I wasn't angry anymore. That part had passed. What I felt instead was focused. I called Travis. He picked up on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" Same smooth tone, like we were still just two neighbors making small talk. I didn't match it. "You want to explain why there's a pipe running from my spring into your job site?" Silence. Just for a second, but long enough. Then he exhaled. "All right. So, we've had some issues with our water deliveries, trucks running behind, suppliers. You cut my fence," I interrupted, still calm. "You dug into my land. You tapped my spring." Another pause. Shorter this time. "It's temporary," he said. "We were going to come talk to you, work something out." "No, you weren't." That landed. I could hear it in the way his voice tightened just a little. "Look," he said, shifting gears, "this doesn't have to be a big deal. We'll compensate you, of course. Fair rate. Above market, even. You won't lose anything here." I laughed at that, not loud, not amused, just a breath with teeth in it. "You already took it," I said. "That's the part you don't seem to get." "Let's not escalate this," he replied, a little sharper now. "We're building something significant out here. There's a lot of moving parts. Sometimes adjustments have to be made." "Then adjust your side of the fence," I said. "Shut it off. Today. I'll look into it," he said. And just like that, he tried to end the conversation. "Don't look into it," I said, my voice dropping just enough to carry weight. "Fix it." He didn't respond. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand for a moment, staring at the screen, then slipped it back into my pocket and grabbed my keys. There's a town about 40 minutes from my place, small, one main street, a courthouse that's seen better decades, and an attorney named Daniel Ruiz who's been practicing water law longer than I've owned a shovel. Daniel's the kind of guy who doesn't waste words. You walk into his office, you get to the point. I set my phone on his desk, hit play, and let the video run. He didn't interrupt. Didn't react much either, just watched, once, then again. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "How long has this been going on?" "Few weeks, maybe 3, I said. Pawns dropped over a foot. He nodded slowly, already reaching for a file cabinet behind him. You've got your documentation, deeds, permits, any registered water rights. I brought everything, I said, tapping the folder under my arm. We spread it out across his desk. Property surveys, old county records, the original registration of the spring. Papers that most people would have ignored, but out here, they matter. He found what he was looking for about 10 minutes in. There it is, he said, sliding a document toward me. 1942, senior appropriation rights tied to your parcel. That's very good for you. Meaning, he said, looking up at me now, a faint edge of something like satisfaction in his voice. They didn't just trespass. They diverted a protected water source without authorization. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a violation. I leaned back slightly. So what happens next? He didn't hesitate. We moved fast. And he meant that. Within a couple hours, he had filed for an emergency injunction. By the next morning, there were 2 county officials standing on my land. One of them a water enforcement officer, the other a hydrologist carrying equipment I didn't fully recognize, but understood well enough. They were methodical, measured flow rates, traced the pipe, documented everything. I walked with them part of the way, answering questions when they asked, staying quiet when they didn't. At one point, the hydrologist glanced at his readings and let out a low whistle. That's a steady pull, he said. Not small either. How much? I asked. He did a quick calculation, then shook his head slightly. Rough estimate. North of 15,000 gallons over the last few weeks. Maybe more. I just nodded. Didn't say anything. Because hearing the number didn't change how I felt. It just confirmed it. We crossed the fence line together, walked straight onto their site like we belonged there, because at that point, we did. Workers noticed us almost immediately. Conversation slowed. A few guys stepped back, watching. The officer didn't acknowledge any of it. He walked straight to the tank, followed the pipe with his eyes, then reached down and turned the main valve shut. Just like that. A heavy metal clunk, then silence where there had been flow. That's when Travis showed up. He came out of one of the trailers fast, hard hat on, phone in hand, already talking before he even reached us. What's going on here? The officer didn't turn around right away. He finished securing the valve, then faced him calmly. Unauthorized diversion of a registered water source. This operation is being shut down pending investigation. Travis looked at me, then back at the officer. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. We've been working to resolve. Save it. The officer cut him off. You can explain it in court. For a second, you could see it on his face, that flicker where confidence meets reality and doesn't like what it finds. This is going to cost us, Travis said, his voice tightening. I finally spoke then. It already did. He held my gaze for a moment, something hard settling in behind his eyes, like he was recalculating the situation in real time and realizing it wasn't going the way he expected. And that's when the real damage started, not with a fight, not with shouting, but with a single valve, turned off at exactly the right moment. Once that valve got shut off, everything changed, not all at once, not in some dramatic explosion, but in this slow, almost quiet unraveling that you could feel spreading through their entire operation like a crack in glass. Concrete work is a funny thing, most people don't think about it, but it runs on timing. You don't just stop halfway through and pick it back up later like nothing happened. When the water stops, everything stops. Mixes go bad, pours get delayed, schedules collapse. And that's exactly what happened. At first, it was just confusion. Crews standing around, checking hoses, tapping gauges, thinking maybe it was a pressure issue or a mechanical failure. Then someone figured it out. Word spread quick. The water wasn't coming back. By the end of that first day, trucks that were supposed to be pouring foundations were idling instead. By the second day, some of them didn't even show up. I didn't go over there again right away. Didn't need to. I could see enough from my side of the fence. The pace had changed. Slower. Hesitant. Like a machine that wasn't sure if it should keep running. A week later, I drove into town for supplies and ran into a guy named Owen at the hardware store. He'd been doing subcontract work on that site, framing, I think. He looked tired. Not just physically, the kind of tired that comes from things not lining up the way they're supposed to. You hear what's going on out there? He asked me, leaning against the counter. I've heard a little, I said. He let out a short breath. They're behind on payments. Couple guys already walked. More thinking about it. I nodded once. That fast. Faster than you'd think, he said. When the money hiccups, People don't stick around to see if it recovers. That stuck with me, not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed something I'd already started to see. This wasn't just about water anymore. It was about pressure. When I got back home, I noticed something else: fewer vehicles on their site. Not empty, not abandoned, just thinning out. Like people were quietly stepping away before things got worse. Meanwhile, Daniel was moving things forward on our side. The civil case went in clean: trespass, unlawful diversion, damages tied directly to loss of water volume and impact on my land. The state filed their own charges not long after. That part, I didn't even have to push. Turns out, when you interfere with a registered water source out here, especially one with senior rights, the state takes it personally. Travis called me twice during that stretch. I didn't pick up the first time. Second time, I did. His voice wasn't the same. Still controlled, but the edges were gone, replaced with something tighter, more urgent. "We need to resolve this," he said. "You had a chance to do that," I replied. "We're prepared to offer compensation," he continued, talking over me slightly. "Significant compensation. This doesn't need to go further." I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window toward the pond. The water level had stabilized now, slowly recovering. "You built your timeline on something that wasn't yours," I said. "That's not my problem to fix." A pause. "Longer this time. You're going to drag this through court?" he asked. "I'm going to finish it," I said. He exhaled, sharp, frustrated. "You realize this affects more than just us, right? Jobs, contracts, people who had nothing to do with this." "And whose decision was that?" I cut in. Silence again. That was the last time we spoke directly. They tried to settle twice after that. Offers came through Daniel, numbers that might have looked tempting to someone else. But it wasn't about the number. Not anymore. Because here's the thing. If they'd asked me in the beginning, if they'd come up that road, knocked on my door, explained their situation like decent people, we might have worked something out. Maybe not long-term, maybe not cheap, but something. Instead, they cut the fence. And once you do that, you don't get to rewind it. The trial itself wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no surprise witnesses bursting through doors, just facts, laid out clean. The video helped. The measurements helped more. 17,000 gallons. That was the final number they settled on. Pulled in just over 3 weeks. Every gallon accounted for. Their defense tried to frame it as a temporary necessity, a logistical issue, a miscommunication between teams. But the judge didn't seem interested in that angle. Temporary doesn't mean permitted, I remember him saying. That line stuck. The ruling came down a few weeks later. Full restitution for damages. Mandatory restoration of my property, including the trench, the fence, everything returned to its original condition. Legal fees covered. And on the state side, fines. Big ones. Big enough that about 4 months after all this started, I heard through the same small-town channels that Silver Creek Ridge Development had filed for bankruptcy. Just like that. All those signs, all those promises, gone quiet. I drove past the site once after that. Not to gloat. At least that's what I told myself. Just to see. The roads were still there, carved into the hillside, but unfinished. A few concrete slabs sat exposed, like half-told stories. Equipment had been pulled out, trailers gone. What was left felt paused. Not alive, not dead, just abandoned in the middle of becoming something it never got to be. I stood there for a minute, hands in my pockets, looking at it all, and I tried to figure out what I actually felt. It wasn't victory. Not really. It was quieter than that. More like balance. They took something that wasn't theirs, and the cost of that decision kept expanding until it caught up with them. Not because I chased it, but because they set it in motion themselves. And yeah, part of me wondered if it had to go that far. If there was a version of this story where it ended differently. But then I'd think back to that cut wire, that trench, that pipe running under my land like I wouldn't notice. And I'd shake my head, because some lines, once crossed, don't get negotiated, they get answered. Now here's the part one keep going back and forth on. Did I do the right thing by pushing it all the way? Or should I have taken the settlement, shut it down early, and let everyone walk away with less damage? I know what the law says. I know what my rights were. But law and right aren't always the same thing, at least not in how people feel about them. So I'm curious what you think. If someone cuts into your land, takes your water without asking, and then tries to pay you after the fact, do you settle? Or do you see it through, no matter what it costs them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd probably expect. And yeah, I've seen both sides of this one.